From the John DeVito Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, April the 29th, the year of our Lord, 2015. And now, here they are, live and in person. Jim and Rich.
I'm not sure about live, but
I'm here with Jim Burr under his saddle, Leon.
I don't know about live.
Live, yes, we're live.
We are?
We're live. Hey, I just woke up. We're on the air. Here we go.
More coffee.
More coffee for Jim. Jim,
so why didn't Rose impress you last night? Since you texted me.
You know,
at 9:33 last night.
What does Stacey King always say? Bigger, faster, stronger, whatever. He's not faster, and he's not. He's not
big. Maybe bigger. I don't know
if bigger is part of it. But he's stronger, faster, whatever. But he's, you know what? He's just not as fast, and he's, you know what? Right now the Bucks are showing him up on the court. The Bulls looked absolutely terrible.
Now let's see. It's 3-2 now.
Yeah.
You know, the other one that, the other person that kind of shared your opinion, let me see if I can find it from last night.
Shared my opinion?
Shared your opinion. Or just maybe like he shared your opinion.
Didn't want them shorn, he wouldn't have made them sheep, as Eli Wallach said in the Magnificent Seven.
Here, he sheared it.
He sheared it.
At about 12 minutes after you texted me, I see this post from one Chester W. Kopic.
Oh, Chet Kopic, okay.
The kid was mediocre at best. Derrick Rose in particular, and the Bulls in general, lackluster versus Milwaukee.
Very.
Rose will feel bad about this loss for maybe 7 minutes.
I don't know about that.
Noah will go through torments.
Yeah. Noah played hard last night, as usual.
As he always does. As he always does.
No, I mean, it wasn't, you know what, Jim? I should say this. It wasn't just Derrick Rose. Jimmy Butler looked like he was wading through cement, and Pau Gasol made some really, I mean, he played well, but he made some really stupid plays, especially at the end. And it wasn't a great performance by the Bulls. And the other thing I noticed, Tony Snell was on the floor at the end, or towards the end anyway. And at one point, he took a three. I mean, at a critical spot. And I'm like, well, I mean, nothing against Tony Snell, but you've got your better guys out there. Why is he taking a three? Unless Thibodeau is just figuring everybody else is playing so bad, what's the difference? Who takes the three? So it was not a great performance at all by the Bulls. So
can they get through this round?
You know what? I'll tell you what. I am not an expert on NBA defense, but the Milwaukee Bucks look like a really good defensive team. I don't think it's like right in your face. They don't do anything overt. It's not super ball pressure, but they play. I think Jason Kidd's got them playing some really nice defense, and it's posing some problems for the Bulls. And I think the Bulls should still be able to handle closing the series out. But you know what? I saw the last two periods of the overtime game they won. Game 3, which is game 1 in Milwaukee. They didn't look that great. The second overtime they looked dominant. First overtime they looked terrible. They looked terrible closing out that game.
Yeah, I got on and started to watch it in the fourth quarter, and I thought, oh my God, they're giving this away.
And then the fourth game they gave away basically at the end. And last night they looked terrible. So I don't know. I mean, you can't underrate the Bucks. The Bucks are a young, improving team, and they may be improving as the playoffs go on. So I don't know. Do you remember?
And they are without what could be arguably their best player with Jabari Parker.
Oh, that's true. They don't have Jabari Parker, and that's true.
And a little thing like what happened at the end of that game when when Rose turned the ball over. That could be the kind of thing that gives a team a spark.
That's true. And I'll tell you what, Derrick Rose just does not have, and it could be conditioning too, because I'm seeing all these games at the end, And maybe he shouldn't be out there at the end, because if his conditioning's not there and he's trying to do the things that he normally does, and the Bucks, I've seen, they've taken the ball away from him numerous times in just a little bit that I've seen. And I'm like, this guy just does not have the burst that he had. And you know what? We texted back and forth a little bit the other day. I didn't see Taj Gibson at the end of the game last night at all. The whole fourth quarter, he was not in. And I'm thinking, as you said, that ankle may be still bothering him, because even when I did see him play in a prior game, he just didn't have the explosiveness.
You mentioned that.
Yeah.
That he just did not have the...
Yeah,
the Taj.
Yeah, he was not the same explosive type, very powerful type of player that he normally is.
Yeah.
Now, how about the good news, though? Huh? Those Hawks? Jim.
Let's just finish one more
the
thing.
Bulls?
Let's just finish one more thing on the Bulls. You got Kevin Love out for conceivably 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah.
Can they beat Cleveland, provided they get out of this round?
Not the way they're playing.
No.
Cleveland's got too many weapons. You know what?
They got one weapon. That's all they need, really.
Well, they got the one big one, but you know what? You got Kyrie Irving, who's going to be more than a match for supposedly our best player.
Yeah.
And you have some, you know what? I have to tell you, whoever, I can't remember the name of the Cleveland GM, but that I first criticized that trade that they made with the Knicks, but bringing J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert over has really
made a difference
really helped
in
that
yeah,
team
that's
big
helped
time.
that team.
So, I mean, you got J.R. Smith, who can, he's a scoring machine if needed, and you got Shumpert, who's a very good defensive player. So, I don't see the Bulls beating the Cavs, to be honest, especially what I've seen of them in these games with the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be tough. If they did, they'd have to really, really have changed a little bit. And things can happen quickly. I mean, you could be playing bad, then you could be playing good. So that can happen.
And like I said, that little turnaround can just be what happened at the end of that game when the Bucks won.
Yeah,
that can be the thing.
Yep,
that can get into your head in a good way on one side and get in your head a bad way on the other side.
Yes. Yeah, that's for sure.
I texted you last night late, and I
saw that you said Vern Gagne passed away.
Yeah.
One of our John, do you remember Vern Gagne? Were you
ever
a wrestling fan?
Were you a wrestling fan? No, Vern Gagne passed away. He ran the old NWA. AWA.
American Wrestling Association.
American Wrestling Association, which was basically the Midwest.
Yeah, he was basically Minneapolis, Chicago, that type of thing.
Yeah, they were basically the Midwest. In the old days, wrestling was not the national organization that it kind of developed. Everybody was kind of regional.
Yeah.
And the WWF was East Coast. And the AWA was here.
Yeah, NWA would have been down south.
Yeah.
And out west, I think they had I think the big promotions out west were like in the Northwest. I'm not sure what they were called, but I know that even when Vince McMahon was starting to put the WWF together to what it is now, when he would start to basically steal. Really.
Now, Vince's old man was the original promoter.
Yeah, but when Vince Jr. started to put the WWF together as a national, as you say, national organization, one of the areas that he grabbed wrestlers from was the Pacific Northwest. He brought in guys like Billy Jack Haynes and trying to think of some others, but that was a hotbed up in Oregon. There was a big promotion like in the Portland area. So
yeah.
But at any rate, Vern Gagne, I can remember Jim having one of his mainstays, and never was a heel. And I don't think Vern Gagne ever was a heel.
No,
at least
he never
not in
was.
the time that I watched him.
No.
But one of his big guys, who was always a good guy, was Wilbur Snyder.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, since I looked at that one comment about the Bulls before, Chet Kopic also, who was a ring announcer and a big wrestling fan.
Right.
He was more of a ring announcer in the days when the WWF started in here.
Yes, he did. I saw
But-
him at the Old Horizon a few
Sure.
times as the ring announcer.
Sure. Rest in peace, Vern Gagne, wrestler and promoter par excellence. Miss your glory days with Bruiser, Crusher, Bobby Heenan, Blackjack Lanza, and Wilbur Snyder.
Yeah. Oh my
Boy,
gosh. Yeah.
you were a stand-up guy, and he was.
Yeah. Vern Gagne was the he was the real deal, and he actually was, I believe, a championship wrestler. I think he wrestled at Minnesota.
I was
and-
going to say University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
He was a college champion wrestler.
Yeah, so he was he knew the sport, the legitimate and the pro part of it,
and the illegitimate.
the illegitimate.
That's right. All right, that was another topic I wanted to make sure we got
Yeah,
into
Vern Gagne,
before
very
we
well worth
even for a couple of
mentioning. Well
even
worth
for a couple of minutes.
Yes.
You were starting to say something about the Blackhawks.
Jim, when I was telling my son was home for the weekend, and we were talking, and I said, you know what, Tom, you didn't get to see the Bulls in their Michael Jordan heyday, which was a great thing to see. But I said, these Hawks, I don't say they're going to have the same success winning 6 Stanley Cups like the Bulls won 6 NBA championships, but just the how would you say, the intestinal fortitude that this team has is just, as a fan, I'm sort of, at this point in my life, a docile sort of fan. It takes a lot to get me, revved up. But watching the Hawks play and just seeing the way how big they come up when they're behind the 8 ball is just does my heart good, as a sports fan. And I would say that's where they resemble the old Bulls, because the Bulls would break, if you're the other team, they'd break your heart. And that's what the Hawks are good at doing.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's going to be a big test for Minnesota, since the Hawks have knocked them out 2 years in a row.
Yeah, this will be a really tough series.
Minnesota's much better than they were.
Yeah, Minnesota's got a really good team. They've got a hot goalie. I'd say the biggest thing, and again, I'm not a hockey expert, but Devin Dubnyk, who is the Minnesota goalie, actually was acquired in a trade from the Phoenix Coyotes at the trade deadline, and he was not the Coyotes' number 1 goalie. He was their
backup.
goalie.
Yeah.
Which brings me into another topic I really like to talk about, and I'm not going to go into the whole can of worms there, but it's interesting. Here's a backup goalie. Obviously, somebody in the Minnesota organization saw something they liked, and it goes back to what I always say, and maybe the way I say it doesn't really clear up the picture for anybody, but you got to know what you're looking at. And in this case, Minnesota knew what they're looking at. It's a backup goalie that they traded for, and this guy's hot as can be. He's really they were not even in playoff contention when they picked him up. Since they got him, they went from, I think they had 40 points at the time that they traded for him. They finished the season with 100 points. So he's been hot as a pistol. He's been good in the playoffs. Whereas
the Stanley Cup adage was a hot goaltender will take you all the way.
Hot goaltender. So the big thing is for the Hawks is they got to sort of, I don't know if this is the best way to say it, but break this guy's confidence, break his confidence to a certain extent, and show that he's vulnerable. That's the main thing the Hawks have to do. They have to put some goals in on him.
They have to put some goals in on him. They have to put some pressure. Yep. I still say they missed the big body in front of the net.
They're always going to miss that.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have that. I mean, Bickle is good along the boards. He'll take some people out, but not so much of a net presence. The main guys they have
everybody's favorite girl during hockey playoffs, a net front presence.
Yeah, a net front presence. Yeah, I think the 2 main guys who do that for the Hawks is one would be Shaw. The other is Patrick Sharp does a lot of that, and those aren't big guys. I mean, not compared to, say, what we had with Dustin Byfuglien or and you know what? I'll tell you, Hossa actually at his age will get in front of the net and
scrap around.
Those guys are, yeah. The Hawks, it's just that they don't have the super big body that you could put in front of the net.
No, this is going to be an interesting series. I can't make up my mind which way I think it's going to go.
The big thing for the Hawks is not to give up the home ice, because the good
No.
thing for us is we got home ice.
Yeah, they've got home ice, and they haven't even announced what day the series is going to start yet.
Well, they won't announce that because they have
wanna
to wait
get
for the two other series
two
that are
others
still going
to
get
which
done.
is okay. This is good for
Good
for the Hawks,
because we got both. There's two series that have one more game to go.
right?
That's
So
Tampa
at least
Bay and Detroit, and then the Islanders and the Capitals. So
Yeah.
those have to be finished up. Then they'll announce the dates, and I would think that if this,
they want to get everybody on the same cycle.
yeah, if this is, I'm not sure when both of those. I don't know if both of those teams are playing today, or if one's playing today, one's playing tomorrow. But what I would say, the likely thing is maybe a Friday start or a Saturday start.
I would think either a Friday or a Saturday start, or get the Sunday afternoon TV on something. Let me see if I can get an idea of.
The critical thing for the Hawks is, I'll tell you, our defensemen are putting in a whole lot of ice time, and it doesn't seem to affect them too badly. But you never know down the line how it's going to affect them, because at the end of the game on what did they finish it off on Saturday?
Yeah,
At the end of the game, we were basically going with four defensemen. Roosevelt was in
Yeah.
there a little bit. Timonen was not seen after he tackled James Neal in the corner. I mean, tackled him and bear hugged him to the ice. So that was the end of his night.
Thank you. Have a seat.
Yeah, have a seat. That was it. So
nothing on the schedule. Nothing on the schedule today as far as hockey. Today's the 28th, right?
Yeah.
Last night the Lightning beat the Red Wings 5-2, and the Caps beat the Islanders 2-1. And there is nothing on the schedule for today.
Okay, so that they played last night. So it'll be tomorrow that they play, no doubt.
Yeah.
So that means you're talking about a Friday, maybe even a Saturday start.
Friday at the earliest to start. So.
I would say.
So to have almost a week to rest and
It's
heal.
nice. We needed it, I think.
And Crawford's going to start game 1.
Yeah, I think that's the way it should be.
I think so too.
Although actually, I found it interesting when they had the reporters in the locker room after the game. They talked to Patrick Kane, and I was interested to see that his take on it was pretty much what I had thought I had seen, where he said, basically, he said Crawford and Darling in the games where they let up goals, we really sort of didn't do a really good job in front of them. And I would say that maybe both of those guys gave up a soft goal somewhere in that barrage. But I'm thinking to myself, man, I mean, we are right in front of our net, and our defensemen are not clearing these guys out, and these guys are like having their way with the puck right in front of our goalie. So I don't see how the goalie, I mean, unless he's Superman or really got ESP or something, is going to stop any of those shots.
Right.
So it was. I think both of the goalies are fine. Whatever damage that they got done to them wasn't their fault in the main. So either one, I'd say either one. Although to me at this point, I'd like to see the veteran Crawford go at it. And you know what, Jim, I wanted to bring up one more point. We talked about the Bulls earlier, and I was thinking about the Bulls and the Hawks, because when I saw the way Derrick Rose was playing, I'm thinking there's going to be people say, well, you can't take Derrick Rose out. He's a superstar. He makes a lot of money. But I'm thinking, well, Corey Crawford is our number one goalie, and he makes a good deal of money. But when Quenneville saw that the change needed to be made, it didn't matter what your name was. The thing was what was the best idea for the team. And my point with the Bulls would be, maybe Derrick Rose, I think I said this on a previous broadcast, maybe he'd be better coming off the bench at this point in time.
I think so.
They haven't played with him in the lineup for a lot of games this year. And Aaron Brooks did a really good job while Rose was gone. The team didn't miss that much of a beat. In fact, now seeing Rose back, they probably didn't miss a beat at all. And so you know what? You get paid, and I'm not knocking Thibodeau. I'm going to say this as a general rule for all managers and coaches. I don't care what the guy gets paid. If he's not doing what you think he's supposed to be doing, and now you're in the playoffs, you got to get him out of there.
Yeah.
So
And I don't think, and I think Tibbs is great for playing the hunch, putting together different combinations and see how they work. And I think hockey players as a whole understand a team concept more than basketball players.
probably.
I really think they understand.
Yeah.
You know, I think the egos get to be too massive
In the basketball, they do.
in basketball. Hockey players, that's why I think hockey players are cool.
Oh, the hockey players are the best.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah.
I'd say. Hey, you know what, Jim? I know we're cruising along. We passed the Bulls and we got Vern Gagne. We did a little on the Hawks. But I got to tell you, I'm reading a book about the ninth. This is for all us Cubs fans. If you want to say maybe a good omen, the 1945 Cubs carried 4 catchers the entire 45 season.
Really?
Yes, and we're carrying 3 catchers right now, which is well above what, considering the way things are done today, is well above the norm. I'd never realized that any team had carried 4 catchers for a whole season.
No, that
but
surprised me. I didn't even realize that.
They did. They had 4 guys that they liked
through the entire year.
the entire year, from beginning of the season to the end. And I started to figure this out. I think the next year, the year after the war was over, they expanded the rosters. You could have as many as 30 if they were returning veterans. So
Okay, I didn't realize. I didn't know that.
45 did not cover that. So I started to do the numbers, and and I'm just going by memory what I'm reading. I think they had 5 outfielders. They had 7 infielders, 4 catchers. So that would be 5, 7, 12. That'd be 16 position players. So they probably had 9
pitchers. 4 starters.
Yeah, and the way
Maybe a swing man once in a while.
Yeah, and the guys whose names I'm remembering from the book, I'm pretty sure it probably was 9 pitchers. I mean, they may have had guys go, they might have brought other guys in and guys went down and stuff like that. But they pretty much. The interesting thing was, too, do you realize, I don't know if anybody, I'd heard this before, but I had totally forgot it. The Cubs have a record, and it's probably going to stand forever. They won 18 doubleheaders that year.
Yeah, I remember reading that. That's a fact.
That's a record, and that's not even.
Sounds familiar.
They played more doubleheaders than that. Obviously, they didn't win every doubleheader. So they played. They played like in the area of, say, 40 to 50 games that were twin bills. So you're talking about a 9-man pitching staff that was pitching, doubleheaders all through the season. I mean, there was no break in it. I mean, when you consider it's a 154-game season at that point, and they had probably close to 50 games that were doubleheaders.
Well, I think back in those days too. Even when we were kids, I seem to remember. Usually Mondays wound up being a travel day and a day off. For most teams.
Right.
And wasn't there another day during the week, like Thursday?
At one time, Thursday.
Thursday used to be a big travel.
It
kind of still is. That's usually a quiet day. But I mean, you had guys where you weren't going back to back after a Sunday doubleheader.
Yeah.
Everybody had a day of rest usually.
Interesting thing too is that
who were the 4 catchers? Do you remember?
Mickey Livingston was the main.
Was the main? That's the one
guy.
name I remember. Mickey Livingston.
Mickey Livingston. It was Paul Gillespie, who was a good hitter, came through with some clutch hits during the season. That didn't play that often. Dewey Williams was the best defensive catcher. Had a strong arm.
Okay.
And the 4th guy was not Del Rice, but. And I don't think it was a relation, but I think his name was Ken Rice, and he was very fast for a catcher.
Oh.
Charlie
Grimm
liked them all. And interesting thing, Ed Sauer, who was Hank Sauer's brother, was on that team.
Right, I remember that name.
And the starters, you know what? I always thought that Clyde McCullough and Dom D'Alessandro were on that team.
I'm surprised not that McCullough's name wasn't mentioned.
McCullough, if you go to Baseball Almanac and look at the 45 Cubs roster, McCullough, I don't know if you've ever looked at the Baseball Almanac rosters, but there's all the position players that appeared during the year. And then they have like extra players. So guys maybe who were there and in uniform, or maybe even appeared in a few games. Clyde McCullough on the Baseball Almanac roster is listed as in that category as an extra. So he was maybe there at some point in the year, but never in the book. I mean, he never really played. Dom D'Alessandro, who I thought was on that team, was not on that team. The guys they had were Penis Lowry was basically the left fielder. Pafko was in center. Nicholson in right.
Right.
Frank
Swish.
Yes, and Swish had a bad year. He had gone from the leading the National League in home runs the previous year. He was down. He had like 13 home runs. And
I think he led the club too. I think.
They didn't get that much into that because in that era, for whatever reason, now the 1 year, 42, I think it was 42 or 43, they had the Balata ball, which was which, and then towards the end of that year, because there were so few home runs being hit, they took balls from the previous season,
prior year,
and used them. And then after that, for whatever reason, the problem was alleviated, and they went back to the regular ball. But home runs as a whole were down. And Nicholson may have led the club in home runs that year, although you had Pafko, who was capable, but still young. He was only in his first or second year.
And Phil Cavarette at first.
He had Cavarette at first, Don Johnson at second. Lenny Marullo played short, and Hack was at third. So
I think Lenny Marullo is the only last surviving member of that team.
Is he? Lenny Marullo, actually, it was an interesting story. The Cubs gave him a $1,500 bonus to sign. Somebody had seen him. I think he was from somewhere in the East.
Yeah.
And he was going to school at, I want to say, Villanova on a baseball scholarship. Well, the Cubs unintentionally, because the things, you didn't have the communication or the knowledge that was going on back then. The Cubs didn't know that he was actually a college student and played baseball on scholarship. So they unintentionally signed him. Well, when Phil Wrigley found out that had happened, they wanted Marullo because Marullo came from a really poor background. So when he came home and gave his mother the $1,500 check, that was like, they said, twice what his father made in a year. And he handed over the check to his mother. And when Phil Wrigley found out that he was actually on scholarship at, I think it was Villanova, he wrote a check for $4,000 to the university to cover the fact that they had already paid for this guy's scholarship, and said, I'm sorry, we didn't mean this, and handed a $4,000 check over to the university, which would have covered his expenses as a scholarship athlete for 4 years. And I'm like, wow, man, are things done different then than they are today?
Wow, life was different.
It was a lot different. So, but the interesting thing, in addition to the four catchers, they had the backups in the outfield were Ed Sauer and Frank Sikori, who later
became an umpire. Right.
And they actually carried Heinz Becker was the backup first baseman. Charlie Grimm knew him from when he played with the Milwaukee Brewers.
Probably went to,
and he was a guy who was a very
ate a lot of German food together.
Probably, very good guy, very good hitter.
Went to Mater's.
But he had terrible problems with his feet.
I remember.
And the other two backups.
I remember those stories in Bill Veck's book. I think talking about Heinz Becker and his bad feet.
And the other two backups were shortstops, Roy Hughes and Billy Schuster. Who also could play, obviously, other infield positions.
What's the name of this book?
It's the last 1945, the last World Series at Wrigley Field, I think.
Oh, okay.
And the guy is really, what's interesting? He goes through all of the teams, and I mean, it's brief, but he goes through all of the teams in the National League and tells what happened with them and the Warriors. And he'll say, they lost. This team lost such and such a player, or this many players to the war, and then tells when the guys came back what they did. It's just a lot of history, and it's not a long book. It's only 300 pages, but a lot of information in 300 pages. Very, very good book.
Interesting. The four catchers surprised me. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, that was surprised the heck out of me too. But they were all there for the whole year. The interesting thing too, Jim, I'm thinking, one of our favorite conversations is always about stats in baseball,
Right.
especially. And when I read the way Charlie Grimm, obviously with all the double headers and not that many pitchers on the staff, the way he handled his staff, I'm thinking these stats are all a bunch of BS. Because obviously Charlie Grimm had to know who was effective or who might be effective against who, because he's not starting his top 4 pitchers with all those double headers.
Right.
So the other guys are all getting a chance to start. And when I checked yesterday.
That would be interesting to see how many pitchers started, how many starting.
Well,
got at least one start.
You know what? You had, beside the 4 starters, were basically Claude Passo.
Mm-hmm.
You had Ray Prim.
You picked
had,
up
you had Paul Derringer.
and you picked up
You
Baroy
You picked up Baroy.
in July,
But they
which made the difference in the
that
team.
made a big difference. But the other thing, Hank Wise had a
Hank
big
Wise, right?
So the interesting thing about that, though, is that Wise, Passo, Baroy, all finished games from time to time during the year. They closed out games.
Right.
But the other guys they had were Hy Vandenberg,
Right.
Paul Erickson,
Eric, yeah.
Ed Hanazuski. I'm trying to think of. I'm missing somebody, but at any rate, all Erickson and Vandenberg and Hanazuski, I think, had some problems, maybe physical problems. But all those guys started games.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We could maybe get back to
Yeah,
that. I know
let's-
John
let's-
wants to break.
Let's take a break. We'll be back. It's interesting.
You are listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVito Broadcast Center on Jack FM 89.7, WRHS FM Norwich, and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, April the 29th, the year of our Lord, 2015, with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM, Norwich, Illinois. And now back to Jim Leon and Rich Massaro and Armchair Experts.
Back on the small but mighty 89.
The small but mighty 89. What a history lesson. Yeah, there was some.
Yeah.
There was some names, Jim. They were aces of their staffs in those Warriors that I had never heard before. There was a guy named Ed Heuser, Heusser, who was the staff ace, at least in 45 for the Reds. And
That was the year Joe Nuxhall made his debut, didn't
Joe
it?
Nuxhall,
Or was it 44?
I'm not sure which year, but
If it was
he at 15 years old.
He was still the youngest ever to appear in a major league game.
And they actually said, you know what, here's some interesting things. There were some great managers. Charlie Grimm, I have so much more respect for him after reading this book because just the way he handled the whole situation with the Cubs. Took over from Jimmy Wilson, who was really disliked. Stan Hack had actually retired because and Stan Hack was a really happy-go-lucky guy, liked everybody.
Smiling Stan Hack.
Smiling Stan Hack actually retired because he didn't like Jimmy Wilson. When they fired Jimmy Wilson, they said it didn't take much persuasion for him to come back and play for Charlie Grimm.
I didn't realize Hack had retired.
But Leo DeRocher did now the Dodgers, I think, in that period.
Dodgers
I
won
think
a couple
at
of
41 they won the pennant
Yeah.
and lost to the Yankees.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he did some outstanding stuff. He had Tommy Brown, who's 17 years old, starting at shortstop. Just had and then I think they said with him he went from, he ran the gamut because actually, interesting thing is Ben Chapman, who had been an old Yankee outfielder,
Yeah.
was in his 40s, wanted to make a comeback as a pitcher, and was actually on the Dodgers pitching staff.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then got traded
remember that
and became the Phillies manager.
I remember that.
So
too.
some really interesting stuff was going on.
Yeah.
The other thing is you had Billy Southworth.
Billy Southworth with the
who
Cardinals.
is probably one of the most underrated managers.
And he had a successful run, didn't
Real
he?
real
He won a
successful
World
run.
Series in
I think
42.
42 for sure. And then they were in
And
the
then-
World Series
and
in 43 and 44.
In 44, they played the
44,
Browns.
They beat the Browns, so they won 2 World Series. In 45, the Cubs went right to the last week to beat them, and they went the whole year without Musial or Slaughter.
Yeah.
So they were playing guys like, who did they have? They had traded. Yeah, here's another thing. Talk about knowing what you're looking at. Morton Walker Cooper, before that season, held out. They got rid of both of them. And Mort Cooper was right. I mean, they got rid of Mort Cooper right at the perfect time. They traded him to the Braves for a guy named Red Barrett, who was a Cub killer and was a 20-game winner for them in 45 and a pretty decent pitcher. I looked at his record the other day. But interesting thing when you sometimes, I know I've mentioned this to you before, I'll look at those records of a player and say, geez, this guy was good, but why did all of a sudden he leave baseball or he got traded? Interesting thing, without Musial and Slaughter there, they played Johnny Hopp in the outfield, and they had Ray Sanders at first. Mm-hmm. And if you look, Ray Sanders, not that he had a great year, but he had a good year. The very next year, he was either out of baseball or gone from the Cardinals because Musial and Slaughter had come back. So those guys,
There were no need for
there
him.
was no need.
Johnny Hopp wound up with the Yankees, didn't he?
Johnny Hopp played with the Yankees, I think, and maybe the Tigers
Yeah.
a little bit too.
Yeah.
But it just, you know what, I won't belabor the whole thing, but it was just an interesting book because you see the way things happen. The other thing is, when you start to look at the records of the guys, especially guys who were around a long time, when you had an 8-team or 16-team Major League Baseball, 8 teams in both leagues, a guy like Gus Mancuso, who was a catcher and a veteran, he played with at least 4 or 5 teams in the National League through his career, which was a pretty long one. And generally, if you were a good player but not a star, and you hung around that long, you probably did play with 3 or 4 teams in your league. I see you're looking at something there, Jim. So go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
So
I'm just trying. I'm moving on to
just
thinking
an
of other
interesting
things.
thing. You know what I was going to ask you? Now let's get to instead of the history lesson, let's get to something modern and something I read yesterday. Did you see that the Rangers are going to take Josh Hamilton off the Angels' hands? And of course, it's. Put it this way, it's not really that much of a big deal because the Angels are still going to pay the majority of his, $80 million?
Yeah, they're still going to
own.
be on the hook.
And then I read that he's going to have to chip in $6 million himself.
Really?
Now, how that works, I don't know.
Well,
So, but it's an interesting thing. I just want to get your thoughts on about Josh Hamilton. It seems that people are.
he seemed to do well there, and I think they were pretty strict on him as far as attending meetings and being accountable.
Right.
And it just wasn't happening.
Not with the Angels.
Not with the Angels. They didn't bring that same level. It's unfortunate. He had to be the one who, and maybe it just led to his success down there after all those years of kind of floundering around. That he's one of those people that needs structure and needs accountability.
It sounds like it. And it did seem that from the article I read where they said, I don't know how they said it, but it was almost sort of like the Hillary Clinton idea of it takes a village. It sounds like the whole this is going to be an organizational project to keep him on the straight and
keep him
narrow.
sober.
Yeah. So
now
I
was
think
he?
is good.
Did I read something? He was going through some family issues or some marital
I
issues,
think he's divorced or getting divorced.
and that might have set him over the edge.
That's possible.
That's
so.
all right. Well,
Hey, I was going to.
there was also some discussion, and I didn't read the article. I just happened to see a headline that said, "Should Artie Moreno sell the Angels?" So I don't know if that's a whole part of the.
Well,
part
he
of
may
the
be
issue.
if he's making deals like that, where he's going to be paying
Where he's going to
overpay, and then he's actually going to be paying big bucks for a guy who's not even on the team. Who knows? Maybe he's not able to afford it anymore. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows?
I was going to ask you, Jim. Did I didn't see did the Cubs and Sox play? I think they both played yesterday. Didn't they?
Sox were canceled because of the problems in Baltimore and because of the
that's
riots.
right. That's right.
And the Cubs won 4-0.
Who did the Cubs play?
Pirates.
Wow, the Cubs. Who pitched? It had to be Hamill. Okay.
Hamill pitched last night. So, just talking about it, I don't know why this thought popped in my head. I saw an article. You talk about how everybody has to be accountable and all this stuff in this day and age of thing. Talk about the ultimate case of everybody gets a medal. Did you see the story about the high school softball pitcher in California who pitched a perfect game and lost?
No.
Because of a screwy tie-breaking rule they have in California high school softball.
Oh, what's the rule?
The girl, 7 innings.
I'm interested to see how could you give
how
could you lose this?
Yeah,
what's
this
the tiebreaker that makes you lose a perfect game?
Here's the way it went. 7 innings. She basically through the course of the game, and the game went into extra innings. 7 innings was regulation. Game went into extra innings. She struck out 23 out of the 24 batters she faced.
Mm-hmm.
Game was scoreless, and then at the end of 7, and at the end of California high school rules, softball rules, say if the score is tied at the end of regulation, you begin the next inning with a runner on second base, which I think is yes. Your brow is as furrowed as mine was when I read that.
Wow.
I could. John has a look on his face that is just as confused. So
I never heard of such a thing.
yes.
Neither
Say
do we.
that
So-
again.
In California high school rules for
Yeah.
softball,
Yeah,
if the score is tied after the end of regulation, 7 innings,
yeah.
you begin the next inning with a runner on second base.
Who in the heck went to bed and had a nightmare?
The runner took off for third. The catcher, first of all, no, the way it was, she lost the pitcher wild pitch. The runner took off for third. The catcher overthrew third base, and the runner came in and scored.
Okay.
And then the other team didn't score in there, so
Okay. All right. You know what though?
she had a perfect game.
See,
From the definition of a perfect game, none of those runners were her responsibility.
Right. Well, from what
And she went up and she struck out 23 out of 24.
as stupid as that rule is,
Oh,
at least
jeez.
it's not as bad as I thought. Because I'm thinking to myself before you mentioned that the way the rule was, with the game being tied and then the next inning it begins with a run.
Right.
I thought you're going to say something like, when I think of tiebreakers, I'm thinking of like what they might do in the pros, where two teams are tied. So there's, this wouldn't apply to a game, but it's all the differentials, your conference record and run score or points scored. But I'm thinking, okay, now this is a different situation. It's a game.
It's a game.
So how do you get a tiebreaker when? So I thought it was going to be something stupid like that, where they. And I'm thinking if she retired,
it's probably better defined as a sudden death.
Yeah, that's
like college football. You
Yeah,
start from
yeah.
the 20. You score. If the other team doesn't score, boom,
right,
game over.
right, yeah. Okay,
But it was defined in the article. They called it a tiebreaker,
okay, tiebreaker,
which
it did.
one of the stupidest rules I've
That's
ever
really
heard.
really stupid.
You talk about everybody gets a medal.
Yeah. Well, I think that seems to be the direction we're heading.
Jeez.
It seems to be the direction we're heading, and I don't think it's really a good one.
I wanted
keep,
to
fingering your sporting news.
I wanted
over
to
there.
share. I wanted to share this, and it's not going to be something. I don't know if we're going to get into it today because I want to talk about football. I want to talk football next, but I picked this up yesterday. The Sporting News has come out with a special commemorative edition. Since the Sporting News, for all those years, we referred to it as the Bible of baseball.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And they have a special edition out now, The Game We Love, Sporting News, the Sporting News in 125 years of baseball.
Wow.
And these are some articles in the past, but they also have some past articles, and they have some great rankings in here, like the 50 greatest players, the 10 greatest managers, the 10 greatest home runs, the 10 greatest rookie seasons, the 10 greatest villains.
I don't know. I don't have any villains.
The 10 most unlikely playoff MVPs. The 10 greatest.
There's a lot of those.
There's a lot of
because
those.
that happens all the time.
The 10 greatest announcers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we in there?
No, we missed.
Oh, okay.
We missed the cut.
I didn't know. I thought we might be.
No,
Thought we could have
missed,
made it.
We missed the cut.
That's what I used to like, Jim. When I'd go through the minor league part of the sporting news,
yeah.
and they'd have those
That's why
little,
I like
little one paragraph, and they, it'd be like Coast Toasties or international items. That was, it was, and then the I don't know if the writers themselves that covered the teams made up the headlines of the different articles about the major league teams, or if it was the paper itself.
I
but
think
they had some
it's usually probably
the paper.
It's an editor that does that.
They had some clever stuff. I'm telling you.
I've heard writers now, sports writers now. When they talk about, I just write the article. I don't put the headline.
Yeah, I think I've heard that too. Let's. You know what? You wanted to talk about football.
It's draft.
And we have
It's draft week.
You know what? I'm going to be working later on today at the airport. They called me, so I'll be out there today. And I'm leaving the house this morning, and I'm talking to Tara, and she says, "Oh, maybe you'll see some football players." And I'm like, "What are you thinking?"
That's what I'm thinking.
I'm thinking, why did they hire some Ridgewood football players at Windy City or that I don't know about or something? And I looked at, she goes, "The draft," and I go, "Oh, that's right, the draft." So maybe I will see some players.
We were downtown yesterday, and we were walking south on Michigan, and could see the Draft Town set up down there.
Draft Town. Say what? Listen,
You have time to take your children to Draft Town. You can go to the Adrian Peterson whooping room.
I'll tell you what, Jim.
John's shaking his head. In there.
I love Bill and Andy, and they have their expertise in sports. But I walk into Mariano's on Sunday, and they're talking about. They had heard there was a rumor that Cutler would be open to a trade. It would be Cutler and the 7th round draft choice, or the seventh. Their first round pick, 7th pick.
The 7th pick
for the 2nd pick, which was
Tennessee.
I guess Tennessee's. So they're looking at me. They go, "Well, why would Cutler be, open to going to Tennessee particularly?" I go, "Guys, went to school at Vanderbilt. He's he's an icon in Nashville,
and he has a home in Nashville.
So
that's another reason."
And they go, "Oh, that's right." Well, I don't think that trade's going to happen.
I can't see it. The only trade I would wonder, if anything, if they tried to trade down and maybe pick up a couple of picks along the way.
I don't know. I've read about the draft to a certain amount, but is it that deep where they figure they could get what they want if they traded down? I don't like trading down.
I don't like trading down either. And I saw an article. This morning, and I looked at the Sports Illustrated had their draft issue out, and a lot of people think the Bears' first pick could be Amari. Could go wide out, Amari Cooper. The other possibility would be who was the other name that I looked at here? Somebody said today, certainly with the issue of defense, Vic Beasley, an outside linebacker from Clemson, could be a good pick.
Yeah, there's been a few guys that they have mentioned. Who's the kid from? There's a guy from Kentucky that might be there, but I think they're projecting him to go a little lower. Can't think of his name.
Yeah, because I'm just, Bud Dupree.
Yeah, Dupree.
They think that's kind of just
that
looking
might be
at
why they want to trade down. Maybe.
Yeah,
guys like him.
Yeah, that's just looking at the list, and actually, SI has him ranked 36th.
36th as
in their overall scheme. There's some great names here. I just happened to glance down at one. How about Jaquiski Tart?
Jaquiski Tart.
He's a strong safety from Stanford. By God, I want him here.
You would. You would. Jaquiski Tart. Okay.
Just Jaquiski Tart. I was trying to find some of the projections. Who do you think? Who do you like? Who's your guy? Who's your guy, Richard?
I don't have a guy.
You don't have a guy?
You know what? To me, it's, again, I'm going to go back to, I think the Bears, whoever they pick, wherever they pick, will make a good choice because I really think.
Hard to screw up in number 7, although
no,
Jerry Angelo certainly proved he could screw up anything.
You know what? I just think that with the people that we have running the show now, I think they'll make a good choice. You got with Pace as the GM, John Fox as head coach, and Fangio as the defensive coordinator. I think whoever it is, it'll be a good choice. I don't know enough about the players. All I know is they're saying the safety class is weak, so you're probably not going to see a safety.
You got Landon Collins, and he could be available.
Yeah.
If you're looking for help at safety.
Yeah.
Landon Collins could be available. Landon Collins from Alabama.
Although, Jim, it's always the how would you say it? It's
flavor?
the flavor of the day or the rumor of the day that usually prevails. And one of the things they're saying about Landon Collins is now there was a kid that was drafted a few years ago from Alabama as a safety who they consider to be a bust. I can't think of his name. And they're saying now because the overall Alabama defensive group is so strong that how are these guys really, are they strong because they're part of the group or are they really strong? So that is being talked about. And you can have both. You could be part of the strong because you're part of the group and just strong as well. But I think there's a caution flag out there in the NFL for guys who come from strong groups like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as I say, this one player, again, I can't think of his name. But
I don't know either. I'm
he
drawing a blank on it.
Yeah, he goes a couple years
back. Yeah.
And I could see that. I looked at Alabama last year. I saw them play. I can't remember who it was, and they had a couple of good running backs. But I'm thinking, well, you know what? Are these guys that good, or is it because they're just rolling over the competition with a great offensive line so badly that they look good?
Yeah, you
get some of that stuff. You get that. And I've seen, for this draft, one of the Alabama running backs, not really high, but I think they have one of the guys as a possible. And if I'm wrong, but that's just a good example of how things go. I mean, they're talking about this guy, what's the kid from Ohio State, the quarterback, Cardale?
I forgot his last name.
I can't believe, that other than the sports writers who are dumb, okay, that any NFL team would actually be considering a guy who played like part of a college season and looked good. I mean,
I'm totally amazed by that.
Yeah. I mean, I admire the guy for his accomplishment. It was a great accomplishment. That doesn't make him an NFL ready quarterback by any stretch.
No. I mean, we've had that same discussion talking about the NBA draft.
Yeah.
With guys who decide, well, I'm a freshman. I've played.
I'm good.
I've played 30 games against great competitions, and I've played a grand total of 496 minutes.
Yeah.
By golly, I'm ready for the.
Ready.
Golly, I'm ready for the NBA.
The interesting thing about that, Jim, is that one out of let's just throw a number. Let's say 1 out of 30 actually probably is ready, but the other ones aren't. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably one guy who really knows in his mind, and it's probably not a guy with mind-boggling statistics or from a big school. He's the real deal, and he probably knows that, and other people know it. But the other guys are usually not the real deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, at least in terms of being a real impact player. Mm-hmm. And in terms of and I know you want to talk football, but just really quick on the NBA, there aren't that many guys who ever turn out to be impact players.
No.
I watch.
You get those rare ones.
It makes me think though, Jim. I watched, like I say, the last quarter of the Bulls last night. Michael Carter Williams, and I'm not even sure which school he came from. I know he's only, and he actually, interesting thing. I don't even know how this happened. He played with Philly last year in his first year, and ends up with Milwaukee this year. So obviously, who knows? I don't know the situation, but things didn't go well in Philly in terms of him at least sticking around. Now he's in Milwaukee, and I keep thinking, there's a lot of I remember how we talked about the Hall of the Very Good?
Right.
There's a lot of very good players who probably, you want on your team, but how many impact players are there? Not that many.
Mm-hmm.
And the same applies for all of these sports. And I just think that I was looking, that Cubs book made me look at some of the old records, and I looked at Rudy York, who was on the Tigers team that played the Cubs in '45. And I knew Rudy York was a good power hitter. And here's a guy ended up with 270, I think 200 and, not 300 homers, but 270 some homers. I think his batting average career was 275. Probably a very, not probably, a very dangerous player when he was in his prime. So somebody that you, as an opponent, hey, you got to really take this guy into heavy consideration when you're playing against him. But even with all that, not a Hall of Fame caliber player.
No.
And I think that's where mistakes start to be made in the draft. Who is a guy like Shea McClellan? People say, well, you know what, first-round draft choice, not a very good pick. But you know what? In reality, if you analyzed every team in any sport that drafts, okay, which they all draft, how many first-round picks of a team are impact players? Minimal.
That might be my next study, looking at ProFootballReference.com, looking at draft picks.
If you have a guy that
just start looking at first-round draft picks of everyone,
is good enough to be a starter, you've made a decent draft pick. Okay, I'm not saying you've made a great one, but you've made a decent one. And I would say that is probably carries out through the whole league with every team in it. I mean, not every first-round draft choice is an impact type of player. Yeah. Obviously, they're not.
Right. It's interesting. It was interesting because a couple of weeks ago, when we had our little get-together, I had found an article where somebody analyzed the modern era of the NFL draft since 1970,
right,
and tried to put a value and tried to say who was the best player pick number one, who was the best player pick number two. I started to go, and you brought up the point. I said, "Gee, wouldn't it be interesting to go back and look at all the prior years?" Of that and see who was there. I started to go through that. Actually, I went through about the first 60 picks.
Oh, okay.
Just to see, and just for the sake of argument, ProFootballReference.com has what they has a rating system that they call the career approximate value. Mm-hmm. And I went to the glossary to look up the explanation of it and determine how they do it. And even me being a numbers guy, my eyes glazed over about three topics down as to how they did this. But it was still a great point for an argument's sake to determine who some of the best draft picks were.
Okay.
And it was interesting. I looked between 1936 and 1969 and tried to grade this out on the basis of who the best number one pick, number two pick, and on their career approximate value. And the career approximate value, unfortunately, only goes back to about that they could do this like back into the 50s.
Okay.
So you have some guys that you can't have. It's interesting if we looked at the number one pick just based on that, you had a tie. From between 1936 and 1969, a tie for the best draft pick, selected number one, is the Oakland Raiders took Roman Gabriel. We were talking about him a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that could be the best number one. I did not realize it until I looked it up. Roman Gabriel threw for almost 30,000 yards in his career.
Oh, he was a really
good quarterback.
But he never played for the Oakland Raiders.
No, he played for the Rams.
Right, but he was taken in the first round by the Raiders in the AFL draft.
And then I think he was taken in the third round by the
Rams.
By the Rams. But you have some interesting players that show up, and you start to look at the quality of some of the players that were out there and when they were actually taken, because the scouting was different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were not able to cover everything that was out there.
Yeah, and if you looked at, let me see if I can find it. Now I can't find that one sheet that I had. But I started to look at players taken between 1 and 100.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought this one up to you the other day. The fourth best player ever drafted during that era from 1936 to 1969 was drafted by a team he never played for, but had his greatest success from somewhere else when he was signed as a free agent.
Right.
And that was John Unitas.
Right.
He was drafted by the Steelers in the 9th round and couldn't make the team.
Yeah.
And here's a guy who threw for over. Here's a guy that everybody. You had a lot of great quarterbacks. He held the records.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You start to look at some of the other players that were taken along the way, and start to look at some of the players that wound up in the Hall of Fame. Just looking down the list, Henry Jordan. Great defensive tackle, originally taken by Cleveland, had great years with the Packers. 5th round, 52nd draft pick.
Sure.
Bart Starr was the 200th pick. There's guys
Bart
in the
Starr, yeah, he was like a 17th round draft choice.
yeah, and John Unitas. John Unitas was the 102nd pick in the 1955 draft.
Well, it makes you, this is the tricky thing about drafting, because it's really not about what the person has done, but it's trying to project what the person will do, and that's extremely difficult.
That's the extremely difficult one, and it was kind of interesting too as I was going through this, and I may go deeper into that. I may even start doing this same thing in baseball for the draft. Wait, at one point in time, baseball draft was 52 rounds.
Well, why not?
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
I thought it was kind of interesting the way it did it. But I went through the first 60 picks, and again, trying to grade this out just for the sake of argument on this career approximate value. The best player taken is the 60th pick.
Oh, I wanted to know that, yeah.
Doug Buffon.
Doug Buffon, okay.
And God bless old number 55. May he rest in peace.
Definitely.
Uncle Fuzzy, you were one of the best.
It still holds the all-time record for most interceptions by a Bears linebacker.
Yeah.
2 more than Butkus, 24 for Buffon, 22 for Butkus.
And I did not realize until they were talking about it the other day when he passed away. When he retired, he was the last active player in the National Football League to have played for George Halas.
Wow. Jim, you know what I wanted to say, thinking about just talking about the interceptions and the record that he holds with the Bears, think back to, and now, although I shouldn't say it this way because it probably still holds true, because when you're in high school, you play probably, if you're a good player, you probably play more than one position. You probably play both offense and defense. But a lot of the linebackers from that era had also been like fullbacks, basically, because of their size. But when we first started watching football, now Bill George, I think, was a lineman if he played on the other side of the ball.
I think he was drafted. He was drafted as a lineman. Yeah.
But I mean, Fortunato and Morris, and you could look at their numbers, 31 and 33, were fullbacks when they were, and probably played that in college to a certain degree. And there was a lot of players in the era you're talking about, 36, well, when they got into the 60s, probably not so much, but probably 36 through some point in the 50s, where guys were drafted, and they were Paul Hornung was a quarterback. He was a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback at Notre Dame, ended up to be a halfback with Lombardi's Packers. Herb Adderley was a great running back, became a DB.
Yeah.
Willie Wood was a quarterback. Became a DB. So that type of thing.
J.C. Caroline was a running back.
J.C. Caroline was a great running back. Abe Woodson, the same.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. Now, as sophisticated as the scouting would appear to be now, a lot of what they see, though, is already sort of set up for them. Whereas the old scouts and the front offices, coaching staffs, had to look at a player and determine this is the best position for him, because that might not necessarily have been what he played in college.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So
interesting. It was some interesting stuff, and we may talk about that next time when we get together a little bit more. Because
we'll have our draft.
We'll have our draft. We'll know what the Bears drafted, and I think they reached a point with all the signings, even though that this may not be oh my god type of signings.
It'll be an offensive player that they pick.
That they can kind of reach a point now where you can draft the best available player and not necessarily.
And I'm cringing because it's obviously going to be a wide receiver. I think you're right. It's probably going to be Cooper if he's there, or Kevin White. That's my. I'm going to make a prediction right now because they need to really. Actually, they need to replace Brandon Marshall. They don't have a replacement.
They don't have a replacement.
So that'll
for Brandon
probably
Marshall.
be what they do. It'll be a wide receiver.
But the fact that they're going to a 3-4, Beasley could help fit the need.
I don't think it's and as good as he may be, I don't think he's going to be the guy. Honestly.
All right, we'll see. We'll see what happens. John, I think it's time we leave. All right, John goes. All right, if you want, go ahead. All right, that's it for us this week. We'll catch you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening. We had fun again. We'll talk to you soon. We are Taillights.
We always have fun.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, April the 29th, the year of our Lord, 2015, on Jack FM, WRHS FM Norwich, and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, with the WRHS sports announcers Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita and radio station manager Kevin Zeflik of WRHS FM Norwich, and the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network is Mr. John Seconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, April the 28th, the year of our Lord, 2015. Until next time, please be safe, and thanks for listening. Have a good day. And this is Jack FM 89.7 WRHS FM, Norwich, Illinois.